Oh, mad, hey?
All right. Yeah, we're live. I think I don't know if you have to wait a few seconds before people start joining us. But yeah, like you were saying, I think you're thinking, contemplating getting your fourth dog. So I think we're in a world full of, we're going to be facing an audience full of people who are absolutely dog crazy. So this should be
Yeah.
a really interesting conversation to all of us.
Well, it's a concept. I haven't talked it over with my existing 3 dogs, whether or not their wish might be to have a fourth one. But there's one that's sort of come up who's older, who my heart has gone out to, and I know it's a bit irresponsible, but I do kind of. I really there's so many dogs, but this one kind of struck a real chord with me. So who
Right.
knows? I'll
Okay,
cancel myself.
so I'll get started. Hi, guys, for those of you who are watching and who have joined us already, I'd like to quickly introduce myself. My name is Sindoor. I am the principal and director of Barks. Barks is, I'm by qualification, I'm a canine behavior consultant and a canine myotherapist. So at Barks, we focus on educating people about canine behavior. We have courses for both pet parents as well as professionals. So short workshops as well as a full diploma for professionals who want to work with dogs. And I'm also the country representative for Pet Dog Trainers of Europe. So India country representative for Pet Dog Trainers of Europe, or PDTE. So I am really excited to welcome our guest today, who will talk to us a lot more about PDTE and Pet Dog Trainers of Europe and why it's relevant for us in India and how it's different and all of that. So welcome, Winky. We have with us Winkie Spiers today. Welcome, Winky.
Thank you very much.
I'm going
Really
to,
nice to be here.
yes, I think it's going to be an interesting conversation. I'm going to quickly introduce Winky. Like many of us, Winky started out in the corporate world, but luckily for us, she moved into the dog world. And though she says that though she had several problem-free dogs for a while, her first ever rescue, a terrier named Dennis, was really the dog that changed the way she started thinking about dogs. At first, she struggled to find an approach that seemed appropriate for both him and her. But gradually, through research and increased involvement in the dog world, she discovered a more up-to-date, forward-thinking methodologies, which we will talk about today, of course. Winky says that it's due to this approach that Dennis improved immensely, and she learned about how to communicate with dogs, how dogs communicate, what their instinctive behaviors are, how different drives and instincts are different in different breeds, how to look at the whole picture and not just the symptoms, and how with a calm, holistic, informed, kind, and relaxed approach, life can be improved immensely for everyone involved. Winky now works professionally as a behavior consultant and speaks at seminars and workshops in the UK and abroad. And her first book, How to Handle Living with Your Dog, was published in 2008 by ShortStack Publishing. Winky is also the honorary member and chairperson of PDTE, or Pet Dog Trainers of Europe, and a full member of APDT, Association of Pet Dog Trainers, and ABTC, Animal Behavior and Training Council. So welcome, Winky. We're so excited to have you here. And I've already introduced you, but I would love to hear from you a little bit more about you, about Dennis, and the work that you do.
Well, I live and work in London, and I live with my 3 dogs. Sadly, Dennis died 2 years ago. He was probably about 18. He was 2 or 3 years old when I got him, and he was with me for 16 years. So he was old. And but he probably has taught me the most amount of any other dogs. And after I lost him, I took on another rescue dog who did really well by coming into a home with 2 dogs that I've had from puppies. So he came into a very stable environment, and actually in just over a year, all of his problems that he had, and he's 10 now, he was 9 when I got him, all of his problems just have really just fallen away without actually doing any training. quite often doing very little and just making them feel safe and confident is the nicest thing we can do. And he is an utter joy. So it's very exciting that I have learned enough to be able to help other dogs, and my heart really goes out to all the unwanted dogs. We have far too many of them all over the world that are unwanted. But my passion really is working with pet dogs. I work with pet dog people. So I don't do anything to do with showing or competition. It's literally about people learning to live with their dogs and dogs understanding their people and creating harmony in the home.
Right. That's really what it boils down to, right? I think a lot of times people have these expectations that they need their dog to be a certain way, but eventually what most pet parents want is just harmony, being able to communicate and seeing and learning how to deal with some issues that they simply are overwhelmed with. And just a little bit of guidance should really go a long way in helping them.
Yeah, it's often clients say it just sort of sounds like common sense, and it just seems so sort of simple, and it really is. We make it more complicated. Most of the dogs that I see, the things that people are concentrating on are sitting, lying down, rolling over, and giving a paw. Well, those are completely irrelevant. Actually, having a lovely relationship is the most important thing, not a dictatorship or boot camp, and to be able to just go out walking together for the dog to feel safe. There's so many different ways of doing it, but we seem to have fallen for a long time into a habit of just telling dogs what they should be doing all the time, which I can't imagine is very pleasurable for them.
Right. I've heard Turid repeatedly say life is not an obedience exercise. What we really want from them is just allowing them, how to allow them to be dogs. And at the end of the day, I think that's what we want as well, is just allowing them to be dogs and learning how to be in harmony with it and be at peace with it. And I think that's really what we're looking for, but we don't really know how to articulate it and end up trying all kinds of things in the process.
Also, people seem to be very competitive with their dogs. It's about showing off with their dogs, and I'm not. And dogs have got amazing brains. It just can't make them feel good to be being told what to do and performing tricks and things. It doesn't seem to be what they want to do. I think that if dogs wanted to spend their life sitting, lying down, doing tricks, we might actually see them doing it of their own volition. But funnily enough, we don't. So maybe they don't like doing those things so much.
Right. I mean, I spend a lot of time studying street dogs, and you don't see them doing tricks. But I mean, they definitely, as you said, they have an amazing brain. The kind of things that they're capable of doing is just incredible. You never think dogs are even capable of things like this. I think we miss the point about what they're really capable of and get them to do things that they're not interested in, that doesn't really enrich their lives in any way. Yes.
No, if we're having to use loads of food to motivate them, if we're having to motivate them that hard, they're probably not really wanting to do it. It's not really something they would offer.
Right. Okay, Winky, I want to talk a little bit about Pet Dog Trainers of Europe, or PDT. So can you tell us a little bit about PDT and how it's actually different from other organizations?
Okay, Pet Dog Trainers of Europe was Turid Rugas's inspiration. In 1998, she had obviously already been teaching and knew lots of people, and she decided with a few others to set up an organization for like-minded individuals, because it's very different, because what Turid was teaching at that time really went against all of the traditional obedience type things. And it's very difficult if if all you want to do is competition obedience, and then people don't really understand the kind of complete difference between it. So being with a group of like-minded people means you can share ideas and progress yourself and teach a better message to more people. Doing it on your own can be very lonely. So her inspiration was to join together with like-minded individuals to share a kinder, more ethical way of living with dogs. And that was in 1998. And it was just about having a better understanding and a kinder approach to training and living with dogs. And this year, actually, Turid celebrates 50 years of being a dog trainer. So she's been being a dog trainer for a very, very long time, which is amazing. And so that's when it started. I didn't join PDTE until 2005, and I was the 36th person to become a member. So it was quite a long time. So things have changed enormously since then. But we are a group of people who abide by a code of ethics and have a belief of things that we hold very dear to our hearts, and with the dog's welfare as primary importance. Where they can sit, lie down, or do tricks is completely irrelevant. Really, what we want them to do is to be able to live their best lives. And it's by being together and learning from each other that we will change things. Some of other organizations, they're professional organizations, but they don't have the strict ethics that we do. So we're a little bit more kind of strict about the approach. So there's a lot of things that we like and don't like. And if you want to join PDT, it's not as easy as it is in some organizations. And we do want our members to do continued professional development every year and to be the best that they can, to not just do a training to be a dog trainer and then carry on doing the same things that they've been doing for the last 10 years. So there is a case where some people have trained and then haven't updated at all, and things change all the time with all the lovely research coming out. We learn more. So the way I'm training now to where I started and to even last year, I would think that each year I learn more, and I'm going to keep changing what I do to make it better. And in the beginning, when I joined PDTE, I did feel quite lonely because I was the only kind of non-traditional dog trainer in my area. In fact, quite a large area. So my friends, when I joined PDT, were mostly abroad because there weren't many people here in the UK following the same ethos. But now, luckily, the PDT has grown, and now we have a lot more friends and we can all share. But it's nice to be able to share in a safe space with people with like-minded opinions and thoughts.
Right. How many members does PDT currently have, Winky? Do you know the number off the top of your head?
We currently have, in total, we currently have 188 members. And that's based on, at the moment, this is the time of year when members renew their membership. So that's based on currently. There are still people who haven't renewed yet. So any PDT members who are listening, if you haven't filled out your membership renewal, please get on and do it now, because otherwise it's a nightmare for our membership, Karen, to be able to deal with all of it all at the same time. And within that, in fact, today we have friends of PDTE, and today we had 100th friend of PDTE, and that 100th person was from India. So we have 100 friends and we have 108 members in total. And that is across 22 countries.
Right.
Which is amazing.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of also what I want to touch upon, but we'll come to it a little later. Just because it's called Pet Dog Trainers of Europe doesn't mean that it's only our members from Europe. We have members from all over the world, and of course, India as well. So, and therefore, it's definitely relevant and useful for us as well. So we'll talk about that as well. For those of you who Winky did mention Turid Rugas. So Turid Rugas is my teacher as well, and I studied with her, and she, like Winky mentioned, she's been doing this for more than 50 years. This is her 50th year, and she also a few years ago, was it 3 years ago, she won the King's Medal of Honor in Norway for her contribution to the world of dogs, which for us in India is maybe the equivalent of like a Bharat Ratna award that we have. Being awarded that in the field of working with dogs is incredible. And her big contribution really is identifying, documenting the signals that dogs use to communicate with each other. And there's a lovely little book called On Talking Terms with Dogs that's available. So any of you want to know more about it, just pick up that book. It'll absolutely change your life. So Winky, did you know Turid before joining PDTE?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. When I first got Dennis, I started learning. I did speak to some professionals, but I didn't really like what they had to say. It didn't make any sense to me. So my first course that I went on was up in Staffordshire, and it was Ali Rowbottom was taking a course on rescue and rehome dogs. And Ali Rowbottom is a great friend of Turid's, and she was one of the founding members of PDTE. And I was lucky enough to go on a course and listen to her. And oh my God, it blew my mind listening to her. And then I did a 2-year international dog trainer education with Sheila Harper, who had learned from Turid. But it was also at a time when Turid was coming to the UK all the time. She was doing weekends, summer camps. So for the first sort of 5 years, she was over here all the time. I did every course that Turid did. I stalked her. I did every weekend course and every summer camp. And I did Sheila's International Dog Trainer School. And I also got to know Ali Rowbottom, who's now one of our honorary members, because she was in at the meeting at the beginning with Turid to set up the PDT, which was actually at a summer camp, I believe, in Scotland, when they discussed setting up PDT.
Beautiful. Yeah. Wow. So, Winky, you spoke about the PDT Code of Ethics, and I know that that's really where the big difference is. So, the PDT Code of Ethics actually says something interesting. It says that people cannot use punishments when dealing with dogs. So, could you tell us a little bit about why that's actually part of the Code of Ethics of PDT? Why do you think there's a common misconception that spare the rod and spoil the child, and that seems to have kind of translated over to dogs in some cases, to say, hey, the dog needs to be disciplined once in a while, otherwise the dog's going to be spoiled and going to be doing whatever he wants to. So what is your opinion on this?
Well, back even as late as the early 60s, in the UK, it was actually legally okay for a man to discipline physically his wife and children. Because it's all about control. And we do know that punishment, in terms of looking at science and research, we know that punishment is really not very good. And it's been proven again and again. It's not a great way to learn. And that positive reward-based training is a better way forward, a much better way forward, more ethical way forward. And there are some organisations who don't mind if people punish dogs, and punishment can be very subtle. Locking in a cage, locking away for long periods of time, tying them to a tree for the whole of their life. Doesn't need to be hitting or anything. There's a lot of subtle ways of being unkind. And PDT is about promoting kindness and have better knowledge. So we would hope that anybody who wants to become a member of PDT has already read the Code of Ethics and prepared to abide by them, and to turn away from these outdated, horrible ways of living. Punishment, nobody should live under the threat of punishment. And I know that, it was okay, certainly when I grew up as a child, it was still legal for men to do that. And now it's not. But I know in many parts of the world, it's still okay for men to beat their wives. So of course, if we can't be nice to other people, it makes it very difficult for people then to be nice to animals. So I don't really see any difference. If you're an unkind person, we know for sure that statistically, people who are cruel to animals are quite often sociopaths and have some other very antisocial behaviours with other people. So I don't think cruelty has any place. I think that we think of ourselves as being humane, and we think that we're incredibly smart, and that but people do seem to be rather kind of unpleasant and dominating. We are the only species that want to dominate every aspect of the world, and cut down all the rainforests and destroy the ocean and overfish things and kill things and do scientific research on them. I mean, we're pretty nasty as a species. So it follows that we do seem to think that it's okay to do unpleasant things. But PDT, Turid, right from the beginning, made the stand that this is not. Anyone who wants to join PDT needs to leave that behind and needs to agree to that, because there's plenty of organisations where you don't have to abide by a code of ethics. So if you want to join PDT, you do need to be a particular type of person who's willing to make that change and stand by it.
Right. Winky, when we talk about punishments, we often have these conjure up this mental image of somebody being horrible in terms of either beating or flogging the dog. But from what I've come to understand, when PDTE talks about punishments, it also extends to things like just scolding the dog, or I've heard people say, "Hey, I didn't hit the dog. I just picked up a stick and threatened the dog. I didn't cause physical harm." Uh, but is there an issue with just as they say, just scolding or threatening a dog? Can that cause any issues in dogs?
Well, of course it can, because actually, if we hit a dog, bruises will heal, wounds will heal, but it's the emotional aspect of this. So when we take on some of the rescue dogs, and I'm sure you've seen them, they're really shut down, and they're really in a very sad place. They daren't even do anything. They don't feel safe. And I think that all animals need to live, we should all be able to feel safe in every area that we go into. Nobody should be living in a place where there's the threat, the constant threat. And in fact, I think it's the emotional aspect of abuse that's actually almost worse, because you can, physical wounds will heal, but the brain, quite honestly, it's a completely different thing. So our body language, certainly in my puppy classes and things, I teach people, when you're even to something simple like doing house training with a puppy, if they're having an accident on the floor and they go, oh, and they kind of really, then that can be actually a little bit worrying. And then the puppy thinks that every time they go to the loo, then the human gets very upset, because we don't even need to say or do anything. Picking them up when they're in the middle of doing a wee, that's actually slightly aversive. So we don't really consider. And I think we have to think, if I was a dog or a puppy, how would I like to be treated? And I think that using empathy can be really great. And I'm not saying that dogs are people or people are dogs or anything like that. But I do think that we do need to be more respectful of our relationships with animals and with each other. That there is also the thing in terms of dog training that, some people are very kind to dogs, but they're not very nice to people. I think that really being kinder and a bit more understanding to everybody all the time would go a long way in making things a little bit better. But it's really dogs. I love all animals, actually. There's no animals I don't like, but I do particularly love dogs. And I would just like to see people get the most that they can out of the relationships, because they can really help us to grow as people when we start to really look at it and understand it. But a crossword being ignored can be that can be quite unkind. That's quite a sort of powerful tool. There's also a lot of talk about positive reward-based training. But if you're going to make dogs really desperate for food, if they've just had a meal, then they might not be bothered about your treat. So often people sometimes seem to be withholding food so that to make the dogs motivated. And I think that's also not very nice. Some of the equipment can be quite punishing in terms of people using harnesses where the dogs can't actually move their legs. They're using prong collars, choke chains, slip leads, or just a normal lead. But even if we yank on a harness, that's going to give the body a real old jolt. And, we know ourselves, if you have a bad jolt, if you do an emergency stop in your car, you're likely to have some head pain, neck pain, and back pain for some time afterwards. But we don't walk around groaning about it all the time. And I think that, it's just about being respectful and kind. And having empathy.
Right. And it's interesting that you bring up empathy, because often you hear people saying, hey, they're not human beings, they're dogs, so stop treating them like human beings. And the question I typically ask is, yes, they're not humans, they are dogs, but that does not mean that we have the license to be unkind to them. Treating them like a dog, yes, I encourage my clients and my students to treat dogs like dogs. But what I mean by that is you recognize them and appreciate them for being dogs. It doesn't mean
for being
it gives
dogs.
You a license to be unkind. Yeah.
No, I mean, we should relish who they are.
Yeah. And often I think people sort of, say, do not attribute human emotions to dogs, but emotions are not our unique to human beings. Emotions are something that is across many animals and many species. Dr. Mark Bekoff has this brilliant book called The Emotional Lives of Animals, and he's going to be talking as well at the PDTE Summit, which we will talk about in a little bit. But it doesn't make sense for us to and there are now scientific studies that go out to actually show and demonstrate that animals experience emotions. I mean, scientific studies that show that animals experience pain, and that's just heartbreaking for me. How do we give ourselves the license to say, unless proven, we will assume that animals don't experience pain? It just gives us the license to do horrible things when we make assumptions like this. So we have to count for their emotions and respect it as well.
Yes, we definitely do. We take them to live in our homes, and we need to give them choices, and we need to respect the fact they do it. Of course, they experience pain. It's been proven by science repeatedly. But we sort of prefer to think that they don't have emotions and they don't feel pain and they're not like us in the slightest. But one of the facts I learned about dogs quite a long time ago, and I think it was Adam McCloskey, a Hungarian scientist. Dogs are the only species that have the left gaze bias. Are you familiar with the left gaze bias?
Yes. Yeah.
So the
we were talking about this in this one as well. Yes, talk to us about that. That's very interesting.
And it's really interesting. And they're the only species. None of the primates have the left gaze bias. No other species on Earth, apart from humans, have it. But dogs do innately have it. And I find it absolutely fascinating that in the 14,000 or so years that they've lived alongside people, they become so in tune with being able to read our emotions that they've ended up having the left gaze bias, because it's in their interests to know how we are and if we're in a good mood or a bad mood, or whether we are going to be unkind to them or not.
Right. So, Winky, why don't you tell us a little bit about what the left gaze bias is for those of audience who don't know this?
All right. For people who don't know, the left gaze bias is fascinating. When we look at somebody, so I'm looking at Sindor and I'm actually looking to my left because I'm looking at the right side of her face. So the right side of our faces show the most emotion. And most people are really unconscious of this unless you've kind of read about it or learned about it. So whenever we look at somebody, we're actually looking to the left, to the right side of the person that we're facing, because it's the side that shows us more emotion. And dogs do this, and they've not trained it. And from what I understand from his research, it didn't need to be dogs that are pet dogs or anything. They all have it. Wolves don't have it, but domestic dogs do. And it's fascinating that they've evolved to do this entirely of their own. And it just shows actually how amazing their brains are, that they innately have this in them, and evolution has taught them this. So in terms of us learning about dog calming signals and body language, we're amateurs, because they read our body language way better than we're ever going to read theirs. They are so smart, super smart, really super smart. But, people don't realize, we have dogs who can find counterfeit money, can find landmines, can find ammunition, can find people who are alive under collapsed structures, can find cadavers underwater. They can do the most amazing things. The ethologists work with them with sort of finding backscat or redneck turtles, for example. The things that they can do, we cannot do. We can't even create a machine that can do most of these things. And then people sometimes think dogs are a little bit stupid. I think it's probably us who are a little bit stupid, but we don't really recognize how great that they are. But they're not alone. To be honest, all animals have limbic systems. They all have all the different parts of the brain. They're in different proportions to our brain. All brains are different to all the animals, but it doesn't make any of them any less special.
Right. Winky, so we were talking, you mentioned sort of rescue dogs that can be quite shut down because of what they've been through, and how we need to be empathetic towards it. Now, one of the things we also see is some dogs that have been through a lot of fear express it in a way that is very counterintuitive to us, which is that they may be reactive, or what people call aggressive. And sadly, it's very common for people to be told that these dogs are being dominant, whether they are misbehaving or, whether they're being aggressive, that they're being dominant. And the way to get compliance from such a dog is to dominate them back. So could you discuss a little bit about your opinion on this topic? Do you think these dogs are being dominant? Should we be dominating them?
I think that the only dominant species are humans. We are the only species that try to dominate the entire world all the time. Dogs are not dominant. If we look at the true meaning of the word dominant, you know, that dogs are not. They just behave in ways that work for them. Barry Eaton wrote a really, really brilliant little book, gosh, a really long time ago, and I was lucky enough to hear him speak a few times, and absolutely fascinating. So Barry Eaton's book on dominance is great, but it has been debunked by science many, many times. I went to a science symposium a few years ago and listened to, you know, when we go and listen to some of the great scientists, Alexandra Horowitz and Daniel Mills. There's loads of people, and there's so much research debunking all of this, and yet people want to hold on to this dominance pack leader stuff, which is just has no relevance in the dog world. It is not how it is. I think because human beings are so dominant, we just assume that all other species have it in them, and they actually don't, because they're not going around trying to rule the world. And in fact, if they were, I think almost it would be better if they did. They might do a better job of it than we do. But it's, you know, they're not trying to control the world. What they do, dogs who are very frightened things will try to control their environment. And they try to control their environment when things are a little bit out of control to make themselves feel safe and to bring themselves, you know, to create a kind of safe space for themselves. But it's really us that's doing it. So when we look at the difference between street dogs and pet dogs, street dogs tend to be a lot more curious. They seem to have a lot less problems with each other. They're certainly not going around eating toys and stones and things which are dangerous for them. That's our pet dogs, and that's because of the way that we look after them. So people often don't think it's important to learn how to look after a dog because, of course, nobody needs to learn how to do that. But I think we need to learn a lot more about about understanding ourselves and our motivations and why we do things. Understanding more about people is very relevant if you're a dog trainer, because actually we're training people, not dogs. But understanding more about dogs is, you know, it's disrespectful to not understand them inside and out, which, as you know, we've been on courses to understand about anatomy and physiology, biomechanics, how the brain works, body language, recognizing symptoms, movement, all sorts of things, because by understanding a lot more, then we can really help them. But actually, I think we all need to learn a lot more about people, because we all live with other people, but we seem to be woefully misinformed about people. And quite often I do the birds and the bees talks about dogs, and because people have a puppy that's a female or a male, and they kind of think some things they're a bit unsure about. And sometimes it astounds me sometimes that people know so little about. They live with a human body and they don't know very much about how their own body works, which is sort of, you know, I think I love learning. I absolutely love learning. I find it fascinating, but it is always about finding out more. And when we do find out more, we know that dominance doesn't exist in dogs.
Right.
But it does in humans.
So when we you know, we have been observing street dogs for a while now, and there is another lab in Kolkata that observes street dogs, and we see that their social structures are nothing like what these myths talk about. They're not hierarchical, linearly hierarchical social structures with a clear dominant leader and alpha and things like that. It's incredibly fluid social structures. Is absolutely fascinating. It's so hard to put it in a box and define what their social structures are, because they're just not limited to their group. They interact with members of other groups. They do different activities with members of other groups. So, you know, I look forward to more studies on street dogs that tell us what kind of social structures they have, because it's fascinating, really. It's almost like a television soap, the kind of drama that goes on in there, and it's wonderful. It's so rich and nuanced, and it's really sad to simplify it and think of it as a linear social structure with an alpha, and to imagine that they are sort of in competition with us to take on this position, and that we have to sort of assert ourselves as the leaders. And it's really sad that this idea has caught on and seems to be so popular.
I think some of it comes from fear. I think that humans, I think that the human behavior, quite a lot of human behavior comes about through fear. So if you're frightened of something, then you're more likely to be a little bit more dominant or aggressive towards it. So I think that the people who really want to kind of dominate dogs sometimes maybe have a fear, an underlying fear, because I think if you're sort of confident and happy, I'm not sure that you would, and curious, I don't think that you would feel like that towards dogs. And even all the wolf people have moved away from all the dominance and pack theory. So David Meach, when we listen to some of the wolf mythologists, not the stuff that we have on television, that's literally just for viewing figures and making money. But we know there's a whole different side to it. And it's a fascinating side. It's so interesting. But sadly, people like the sort of sensational side of things, the wolf living in your living room and all this kind of stuff. And some people have they want their dogs to be a bit dysfunctional as a sort of status thing. And it's really, I think that probably if people understood a little bit more about how their own brains work and what their motivations are, that it would help them to understand things in maybe a kinder or more empathetic way.
Yeah, I think we keep coming back to that kinder and empathy. And I think that's kind of the key here. So Winky, I want to touch upon another thing that's part of the PDTE Code of Ethics. The PDTE also discourages use of choke collars and flat collars and instead encourages use of harnesses. Why is that? Why does the PDTE take that stance?
Because something around the neck, quite honestly, it's very useful if all the blood and oxygen gets to the brain, if you're trying to do any dog training. There's a lot of science that supports the fact that if a dog if they experience pain, they can associate what they're looking at with the pain, which can contribute to sort of reactive type behaviors. And it's not all harnesses that we like anyway, because some harnesses actually prevent the body from moving, or they're tightened. So it's the sort of Y-shaped harness that's on the sternum and on the bony structure of the dog, and it should be well fitting. So not all harnesses are the same, but anything around the neck has the potential to do quite a lot of damage. We've got Jean Dodds, who's one of our keynote speakers, talking about thyroid issues in dogs. Well, where's the thyroid? It's around here. So if somebody's yanking away on the dog's neck, then they could be damaging the thyroid, and that there's a lot of, but generally I think blood and oxygen should be getting to the brain. And we know that if we look at anatomy and physiology, as you have as well, that their neck is built very similarly to ours. So would you feel very comfortable? I wouldn't feel very comfortable if I wore a collar and somebody was holding onto it and would occasionally kind of yank on it. There's a potential to do harm. So what we really want to do is think about do no harm. We don't want to do any harm. So by using a well-fitting harness, it means that if our lead handling skills are not very good, there's less potential for us to do that dog harm. So it's about them living as pain-free as possible.
I mean, I have heard people say that a dog's anatomy is different and that they have extremely thick muscles around the neck, and therefore the neck cannot be damaged. But if you really look at an anatomy textbook, what you see is, yeah, sure, they do have really thick muscles on their neck, but a bulk of it is on the back. But when you pull the collar, the pressure is here. You can literally, if you pull it hard enough, you can hear them choke. So you can literally hear.
Well, you can Yeah. So things like laryngeal paralysis are on the increase, and we often see dogs when they get older where they've got a head over on one side, and people say, no, they're fine. Well, how are they fine? Because they can't tell us. So I would much rather err on the side of safety than and make sure that I'm not potentially doing any harm, be my goal.
We lost you for a little bit there, but yes, of course, I sort of wanted to add as well that are you having network issues?
I think I am.
I think maybe.
And I'm just thinking something I can do about it.
Okay.
I'm just going to see if. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, now, yes.
No. Okay.
Right.
Let me just try something. Has it sorted itself out?
I can hear you. I can hear you now, but your video is kind of frozen.
Okay. Sorry.
That's okay.
Is it unfrozen?
I think what Your video is still frozen.
Okay,
I
I'm
sort of
sorry
wanted
about
to
that. I don't
add
know how to
in that
unfreeze that.
that's okay. I think when your network gets better, it'll unfreeze. What I sort of also wanted to add in is when I learned about the damages that a collar does to a dog, the range of things that it can do, ranging from hypothyroidism to headaches to cracked tongue bone to spondylosis and spondylitis, nerve damage, glaucoma. It's just mind blowing, or the extent of issues that it can cause. And there are actually now studies that show us that
Yes.
they actually do cause these things. So then, as like you said, it's simply not worth the risk if the list of issues can be so wide and so dangerous.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I was always rather err on the side of caution.
Right, exactly. On a somewhat similar thing, the topic, the PDTE also kind of discourages the use of crates, Winky, and that's an interesting one because a lot of people do encourage the use of crates. So could you explain a little bit as to why the PDTE actually discourages the use of crates?
Well, there's a common myth that dogs like to live in a den. Well, I haven't seen any street dogs living in a den. I don't know if you have. And it takes
Nope.
quite a lot of time and effort to get any animal to want to live in a cage. I don't think living in a cage is a nice thing to do. They call it a crate, but it's a cage. And I think it all came from America because when I grew up with dogs as a child, we never used cages. And I've lived with 15 dogs. And I have never put anyone in a cage, and I'm never going to in the future. They should feel safe in the whole of their home, not just in a metal box. And if I love my home, but if somebody went out of my front door and locked me in, I would immediately feel less safe in my home. So I think if the only place you feel safe is locked in a metal cage, I don't think it's very nice. And caging things is what we do to people who are very naughty. We put them in prison. It's taking away your liberty, taking away all of your choices. It's a punishment. And a lot of dogs will go into a confined space to lie down if that's how they feel at that particular time. But dogs are polyphasic, which means they like to move around in sleep. So locking in a cage actually inhibits normal dog behavior. And I think that is a huge issue. And I don't think it's what they would choose. So I don't think that any of your street dogs are going to go and find the smallest box on the dump site and sort of get into it and close the door. It's just not what they would choose. And people say, oh, they love it. But they love it after a month of being locked into it and crying all night and nobody listening to them. So for me, it's not, I don't like animals in cages. I don't think that caging is a nice way of behaving. And clearly Tura doesn't, because it's been something that she's been has very strong opinions on right from the beginning. Right. But it seems to be on the increase, sadly.
Yeah.
But there aren't any scientific studies showing that it's a great thing to do. So I've looked.
No.
I can't find any scientific studies showing keeping your dog in a cage you end up with a really functional dog. You can't possibly, because dogs need to act out normal and instinctive behaviors.
Right. In fact, I think there are a few that talk about the ill effects of confinement in animals and the kind of problem behaviors. So while there are no studies that tell us that it benefits them, there are actually studies that tell us that it can do harm. And from what I understand, crates are also illegal in some countries, or sort of not.
It is. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And of course, with street
I don't
dogs,
think it's a kind thing to do.
Right. And street dogs, you can't imagine locking them up in a small box and them putting up with it. They not only do not like it, they actually hate it, and they will express that as well. Most of them are seen sleeping on top of elevated surfaces, or on top of cars and on top of, so if at all they're car sleepers, they're not den animals.
Well,
they getting
up high,
like
getting up high, of course, makes them feel safer.
Right.
The opposite.
It probably gives them an opportunity to look out and see what's coming from a distance. That's probably why they like it. Yeah. Absolutely. It's really interesting. I asked for pictures of street dogs sleeping, and more often than not, you get pictures of them sleeping on top of sand piles, on top of cars. They at least, and if they're a group of them, at least one of them typically sleeps at an elevated position. So that's really interesting. So one seems to have been given the job of the sentry. Look out and let us know what's going on.
Well, you get that in a lot of animals where, one keeps a lookout so they sleep safely. It seems to be quite a normal thing. It's a good survival strategy.
Right. And again, that doesn't mean they're being dominant. It's not that the dog on top is the dominant one. It's just a job like a security guard, or it's just a job that they've been given or they've taken on.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, it's a good thing.
So, Winky, the other thing is, many of us at the PDTE, and I know this having been part of the PDTE, many of us focus a lot on calming dogs down. That really seems to be, instead of training them, our focus seems to be how do we get them to be calmer dogs. So why, can you talk to us a little bit about the significance of why it's important to calm dogs down?
Well, our adrenaline response is really designed for occasional use only, not for daily use. But it seems that a lot of training things think that the dog should be in a constant state of high adrenaline and be highly motivated, almost hysterical. But we know that if you're in an adrenaline response on a regular basis, it's actually not very good for your physical or mental health. So what we're looking for is balance. Of course, have busy days, have fun, have a nice time. But to keep getting dogs into a wild state of excitement all the time is not desirable. It's not desirable in children either. I don't know people with horses and cats and things who try to get them wildly excited, because a cat would be biting and scratching you. A horse would be like leaping around and probably kicking you and bucking you off if you get them really, really excited. So the adrenaline response is really designed for occasional use only, not for daily use. And this is really part of the problem. Is there's something about humans that is indulged by seeing dogs be wildly excited. But we know that once adrenaline starts being released into the system, even when the stimulus stops, that carries on for 10 to 15 minutes. And it can be days or weeks for those adrenaline levels to come back down to a normal rest level.
Right.
And it's really kind of stress. So, there's a big thing in the human world of stress. Stress is just an excessive amount of adrenaline caused by overexcitement, anxiety, fear, anger, frustration, etc. So what we really want is dogs to be able to engage their brain and to learn to think before they act, where a lot of the games that people teach is all about acting without thought. So if we act without thought, we're likely to be a danger to ourselves and other people, whether you're a human or a dog. So being in a constant state of high adrenaline, when we look at the ethogram of the dog and we look at the evolution of the dog, we kind of know it's probably not really the best thing that we should be doing.
Right.
And quite often I see people sort of wanting the dogs to run and they're throwing all their silly balls and things like that. And it's like, do you know what? I can see somebody here who could probably do a little bit of running, but it's maybe not the dog. So, people sort of dwell a lot on dogs being really physically fit, where actually the brain is the thing that should be the most physically fit, because it's the thing that operates anything. So in London, thousands and millions of dogs in London, about 9 million dogs in London. It's unbelievable. And over lockdown, everyone's been getting puppies. So if you've got a big dog who's 30 kilos running around, really fit, charging around with not a single brain cell operating, that's quite dangerous. They can run into people, knock people over, they can run across roads, they can have accidents, and we're having to share the parks with lots of people. So if our dogs are going to be able to be safe, they need to be able to think before they act and use their own brains. They've evolved to become one of the most successful species on the planet by being supremely clever, and yet we tend to make them a little bit stupid by making them just wildly excited and a bit silly all the time. And I'm not really quite sure why we like that. It's fine to be silly occasionally, of course it is, but not every day, all the time, to sort of get them into a state of high adrenaline, because it's not a healthy state to be in when we look at the physiology of the adrenaline response.
Right. And what are some ways to then calm dogs down? How do we do it? Because we're often told, if you want your dog to calm down, exercise them, make them run after a ball, make them run. That's the way to calm dogs down. So
yeah. But we know that's not true when it comes to calming down children or people or anything else. The fitter you get a dog, the more physically fit they are, actually, the longer they can go on being naughty for. And it's just not a great thing to do. And it means that then whenever they see a ball, it could be going on the other side of the road, it could be in the sea with the tide going out. They're going to keep going after it, try and get it. It sort of undoes their survival strategies and any common sense whatsoever. So they haven't become such a successful species by being stupid for the last 14,000 years living with us. But we kind of seem to want them to become more stupid now. And we do know that constantly being a state of high adrenaline actually does kill brain cells. It kind of does affect the brain chemistry. Yeah. So it's, you know, you're not going to be the smartest thing if you are in a constant state of high adrenaline. So it's finding balance. So if we're looking at the ethogram of the dog, you know, Amber Batson's work is absolutely fascinating. She does great courses. And, you know, 8% of the day is spent active. And this is what you see with your street dogs. You know what they like to do. The street dogs are super smart and they're not in a state of high adrenaline all the time. So if the street dogs are not kind of just running around the parks, chasing every butterfly and every shadow, we know it's not a normal dog behavior. And, you know, people have lost sight of what a normal behavior is in our pet animals and domestic animals, because if they really like doing it, you know, wouldn't the Exmoor ponies been just galloping around Exmoor, jumping all the hedges? Well, they don't do that, because the more energy you expend in evolutionary terms, the more food you've got to find. So it's a terrible evolutionary strategy. So we need to look at making sure that our dogs do live for a very long time. We invest so much time, effort and love into our dogs that to have them to live for a long time and to be really good health and to have a good quality of life, then we need to address the physical and mental needs at all stages of life, and to not just be kind of really silly with them.
Okay, so, sorry, okay, Winky. I want to sort of come back to the topic of PDTE in terms of what's coming up and membership. So the first question I have for you is, can people from India become members of PDTE?
Of course they can. They just go onto the website and fill out the form.
Great. And the other thing is, we're all very, very excited about the upcoming seminar, the summit, the online PDTE Summit. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, because of obviously the pandemic, we can't do anything in person. So it was supposed to be in Norway this year. Turid was going to be hosting. So we've gone online. We're doing a summit over 3 days, and I'm really excited about it, because my dogs, I think it's much nicer that I do loads more stuff online, so I'm not leaving them all the time. So if we love our dogs, they don't actually want us to book a plane ticket and fly off somewhere and leave them for several days. So for me, it's very exciting. And we've got a really amazing lineup. You know, Mark Beckhoff, we've got Jean Dodds, we've got Risa Van Fleet, we've got, God, so many. Jane Goodall. I mean, just the most outstanding lineup, including you with your new study, results of your street dog studies. And it's just always the PDT AGMs I love. I learn so much, and it's so inspiring to see such a wealth of knowledge within our membership. But this, you know, to have all of, you know, we've got 10 keynote speakers, we have 20 workshop hosts, and every day is going to have a different theme: healthy dogs, the human-animal connection, and how to build a thriving dog community. There's going to be downtime and things where people can connect and network with each other. And there's wellness breaks and social events. I've never been to anything like this ever. And I'm incredibly excited. And I do think it's the way forward. Obviously, it's lovely to meet up in person, but when we actually love our dogs and we want to spend more time with dogs, I don't think my dogs like it. I used to travel a lot more and go abroad and teach seminars, and I stopped 2 years ago, over 2 years ago now. And I'm not actually wanting to start jumping on a plane and flying off, because I like being at home with my dogs and I like seeing my clients. And I love teaching, but I think that now that we've got all these different platforms, I think that we can all learn a lot online. I think that having practical work and doing stuff in person, I think that is a really good thing. But I think a lot of the learning can be done online, and then we can actually do specific practical work in person. But I'm excited by the way forward. It's the biggest shake-up we've had in terms of education for decades. It's incredible. And PDTE, as far as I know, is the first professional organization to be putting on something like this. I went to the AGM and talk of another professional organization last weekend, and that was online, and it was just half a day, and there was just one speaker and the AGM. What PDTE are offering this year, I think, is outstanding. I'm incredibly excited. So if you haven't signed up for it, get and sign up, because I really think it's going to be a pioneering summit that's going to change things. And I think that's good. I think change is good if it's in the right direction.
So can non-members,
but I also think
sign up as well?
Non-members, everyone is welcome. You don't have to have a dog. Anyone can sign up and learn more and meet other like-minded individuals who are absolutely passionate about all things dog.
Yeah.
So even if you're thinking about getting a dog.
Yes, I absolutely love the energy at the a lot of people who put their dogs first come from extreme. They want to understand their dog before they really try and not really try and change them, but appreciate them for what they are, and try to do things. Sometimes it may not be seemingly the most easy way to do things, but people are willing to invest time and energy into learning about what is the right way of doing things that benefits the dog. And it's really nice to be around people who feel that way, and share stories. And we have workshops that are going to be a little bit more informal as well. So we're going to get to talk to each other, not just listen to speakers. And that's all. And you're speaking as well, Winky, at the summit this year.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So yeah, so I'm just really excited with all the talks.
Yes, absolutely. There's Dr. Amber Batson as well. I didn't know Dr. Jean Dodds was going to be there as well. So I'm so excited about that. And of course,
I think so. I hope I haven't spoken out of turn. I think that she is.
Okay, let's hope. She's just a wonderful person to listen to. And I was blown away that Dr. Jane Goodall is going to be there too, and Dr. Mark Beckhoff. These guys are just incredible, the kind of work that they do. So it's really absolutely excited. And of course, I'm speaking as well. So I can't believe I'm sharing the platform with all of you guys. It's just, I feel very special. So this is really
fantastic.
Exciting.
Well, I'm so pleased that you're speaking, because the first talk I heard you do about street dogs absolutely blew me away and totally changed the way I look at dogs. It kind of gives us much sort of more rounded idea of what they're all about. So I'm very excited for your talk, amongst all the others. I mean, there's like loads of them. So
yes, I can't pick which one to look forward to the most. I just really am so excited about all of it.
I'm just going to immerse myself in it.
Yes, that's the plan. That's absolutely the plan. Loads of coffee and
yeah, and I'll just be sitting on the sofa with my dogs. My dogs will absolutely love the AGM this year, much more than ever, because we'll be doing it together.
Yes, that's the plan. So Nishi, of course, she walked in, and I think somebody said hi, Nishi. She's always the guest of honor. She during the classes and things like that, she'll walk in halfway through, and she always seems. I put so much effort into putting the talk together and the class together, but she's the one who seems to get all the attention. So she's right here down here.
That's often the way, isn't it?
Yeah. All right. So there don't seem to be any questions as such. I think this was a lot of information, and I hope people sort of digest it and then we've given the website and check out the summit and definitely try and attend it. I'll share the URL of your website as well, all of that on it. Thank you so much, Winky, for taking the time to talk to us in India, and hopefully more of us will be joining PDTE and learning from some amazing people there.
Excellent, and I hope to meet loads more people at the summit. It's always a great opportunity, and I think there is the possibility to sort of get into groups and as we do at the physical AGMs, to kind of sit and have a coffee together and get to know each other better, because through PDTE I have amazing dog friends all around the world, and always the AGM goes so quickly normally, and as soon as it starts it's almost finished, and we never have enough time But I think now with things like Zoom and all the different platforms, we should all be able to catch up with each other a lot more. And it is by sharing our knowledge that we're going to make a real difference all around the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So
and
thank
there's a
you
lot of
very
knowledge
much
to share among the members of the PDTE. So that's, I really look forward to it. All right, Winky, thank you so much.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
I will see you at the end of September. Bye. Thank you.
Yes, at the end of September then. Bye.
Okay, bye.